Today we can definitively say that the Gaddafi regime has come to an end.
The world is a better place with Gaddafi gone.
If you have studied African history, then you must have heard of Muammar Gaddafi, the famous Libyan revolutionist and politician.
Muammar Gaddafi, the former leader of Libya, significantly influenced the African continent all through his tenure, which indicates all necessary measures to protect Libyan citizens from the forces of Muammar Gaddafi. Characterized by his unwavering efforts to reinvent himself and Africa's political landscape. Most significantly, his advocacy for establishment of the United States of Africa remains a non-forgettable aspect of his legacy. Despite being in power for over 4 decades, Muammar Gaddafi maintained great ambitions for Libya as well as the African community as a whole.
I'm aware of Mr. Gaddafi's approaches and efforts to get a foothold in your part of Africa and all, and I just like to intervene in caution. I don't think he has worthy causes either.
However, his eventual downfall was intricately intertwined with themes of betrayal, charity, and finance. Deploying a good number of radical reforms in Libya, Gaddafi embarked on a path of Islamic modernization, introducing Sharia law as the foundation of the legal system and advocating for Islamic socialism. He also nationalized the oil industry, using its revenues to bolster the military, finance foreign revolutionaries, as well as implementing of social programs directed towards health care, infrastructure development, and education. In 1973, Gaddafi initiated a popular revolution, bringing forth basic people's congresses as an indication of direct democracy while retaining personal control over key decisions. Astounding his third international theory in the so-called Green Book.
And the country is what he calls a jamahiriya. It's run by a new system of direct democracy.
Colonel Gaddafi is trying to explain his new concept of government in what's called the Green Book, dealing with the solution of the problem of democracy. His third universal theory isn't capitalism or communism, but a system of popular committees and commissions who are always referring their decisions upwards.
Gaddafi effectively made clear his vision for Libya's socio-political organization. By 1977, Gaddafi had transformed Libya into a socialist state known as the Jamahiriya, which state of the masses or peopledom. Even though Gaddafi acquired a symbolic role in governance, he retained control over both the military and revolutionary committees, tasked with policing and effectively suppressing dissent. Throughout the 1970s and 1980s, Libya's foreign policies, including border conflicts with Chad, Egypt, and support for militant organizations, paved the way for international isolation. Tensions with the United States, the United Kingdom, and Israel escalated, culminating in the 1986 United States bombing of Libya and UN-imposed sanctions. In the later years, Gaddafi moved towards Pan-Africanism and built friendly relationships with Western nations, serving as chairperson of the African Union from 2009 to 2010. However, amidst the 2011 Arab Spring, protests against unemployment and corruption erupted in eastern Libya, leading to a civil war in which Netter intervened. This intervention eventually led to Gaddafi's overthrow and subsequent capture as well as his murder by National Transitional Council militants. Still, Gaddafi's legacy remains deeply recognized. While he was hailed for his anti-imperialist views, support for Arab and African unity as well as development initiatives, his authoritarian rule and alleged human rights violations continuously sparked controversy and condemnation. What's more, Gaddafi's reign and subsequent downfall were especially attributed to his deep unwavering affection towards a specific nation, its populace, and its leader whom he regarded as a friend. Surprisingly, it was this very leader who ultimately betrayed. The country in question is Uganda, and the person responsible for Gaddafi's betrayal was none other than the Ugandan president, Yoweri Museveni.
Uganda was moving very well in the 1960s. Then we had a man called Idi Amin. I don't know whether you heard of him. He was a soldier, a British soldier, poor, no education. He came and took over the government.
On his path, Yoweri's early political activism manifested in his participation in the failed invasion of Uganda in 1972 against the regime of President Idi Amin. The following year, Yoweri founded the Front for National Salvation, an ally with Tanzanian forces, in the Tanzania-Uganda War, which eventually led to the eviction of Idi Amin from power. Following his loss to Milton Obote in the 1980 general election, marked by allegations of electoral fraud, Yoweri consolidated opposition forces under the banner of the National Resistance Movement, thereby tearing up the Ugandan Bush War, and by January 1986, following the pivotal Battle of Kampala, Yoweri became president of Uganda. During his reign, Museveni dealt with a series of challenges, including suppressing domestic insurgencies, involvement in regional conflicts, such as the First Congo War and the Rwandan Civil War, combating the Law's Resistance Army insurgency. Scholars have characterized Museveni's leadership as competitive authoritarianism or illiberal democracy, marked by government control over the press and a crackdown on dissenting voices. But despite widespread allegations of electoral fraud, Yoweri successfully secured a sixth term in office in the January 2021 election, gaining 58.6% of the vote. The election was marked by reports of ballot irregularities, pivotal votes in certain areas, and human rights violations. As of 2022, after 36 years of authoritarian rule under Yoweri's leadership, Uganda ranks 166th in GDP per capita and 167th in the Human Development Index. Back to Museveni's betrayal, trying to understand his reasons. It is necessary to delve into the origins of his relationship with Gaddafi and the subsequent events leading to their rupture. Gaddafi's relationship with Uganda predated Museveni's rise to power, dating back to the 1979s during the reign of Idi Amin. During this period, Gaddafi provided substantial moral, economic, and military support to Idi Amin's regime. Whenever Idi Amin faced external threats, Gaddafi was a strong ally who promptly dispatched troops and military personnel to bolster his regime, and so following a series of attacks and resistance against Idi Amin's regime, Yoweri Museveni sought refuge in Libya in 1979, before eventually relocating and settling in Saudi Arabia. After Amin's overthrow in 1980, Uganda decided to organize an election to determine its next leader. However, as earlier mentioned, when the election results did not come in favor of Museveni, he contested the outcome, alleging electoral fraud, leading to the erosion of a civil war between his forces and opposition parties. Facing a shortage of weapons and ammunition during the conflict, Yoweri pleaded assistance from various quarters to bolster his military capabilities in his quest for power. Despite approaching the United Kingdom and the United States for arms aid, his requests were not granted as a result of his perceived proximity to Muammar Gaddafi, the Libyan leader. Turning to Gaddafi, his country's closest ally, Museveni was granted unwavering support, including critical military supplies that eventually led to his victory. Gaddafi's support went beyond mere military aid, with frequent visits to Uganda, suggesting the depth of their relationship. He made significant contribution to the country, financing infrastructure projects, and acquiring shares in spectacular Ugandan enterprises such as Uganda Telecom and Trisnap Limited. To continue, Gaddafi persuaded Museveni to redirect Uganda's oil resources away from Western markets, promising to give a helping hand in developing local refinery and pipeline infrastructure. The extent of Gaddafi's influence in Uganda's economy was profound, with investments spanning finance, real estate, and hospitality sectors. Notably, Gaddafi's backing of the Rwandan Patriotic Front, RBF rebels following their invasion of Rwanda in 1980 further solidified his bond with Museveni. This support included the provision of arms flown into Uganda by the Museveni regime. However, in contradiction, the magnitude of Gaddafi's betrayal, given the extraordinary support and investment he had provided, provides a pivotal layer to dissolving of their once strong alliance. There was Muammar Gaddafi's intriguing involvement with the Toro Kingdom situated within Uganda's borders starting in 2001. At that time the kingdom's ruler, King Oyo Nyimba, was a mere 9 years old. Driven by his genuine affection for the kingdom, Gaddafi generously financed numerous projects there, notably facilitating the construction of the majestic Toro Palace. Additionally, Gaddafi's legacy within the Ugandan Muslim community lives on, as he made significant contributions to the construction of the magnificent mosque, boosting its ability to accommodate up to 3,000 faithfuls, making the second largest mosque in Eastern Africa. During his visits to Uganda, Gaddafi's camaraderie with Museveni, the Ugandan president was palpable. He even suggested out of gesture that Yoweri ought to remain in power for life and questioned for necessity of engaging in elections. Notably, during one of his visits, Gaddafi articulated for the promotion of one of Museveni's sons in the military, from captain to major. This level of support extended to Museveni's presidential campaigns in both the 2001 and 2006 elections, reinforcing the perception of an undiluted friendship between them. However, the eventual rift between Gaddafi and Museveni manifested ultimately two key factors at play, and they include Western interest and Gaddafi's ambitious visions. Gaddafi's non-stop advocacy for African unity, epitomized by his vision of the United States of Africa, placed him in position as a prominent figure in discussions surrounding continental integration. Notably, his successful persuasion of 45 heads of state at the 1989 summit led to the creation of the African Union, a significant milestone in his pursuant African unity. Gaddafi's proposal for the United States of Africa, complete to the single currency and military, elicited approval from Western powers and some African leaders. This apprehension stemmed from concerns about potential disruptions to existing power dynamics and influences within the continent. Surprisingly, Museveni, irrespective of his close ties to Gaddafi and the significant support received from Libya, expressed discontent towards the idea of the United States of Africa. This opposition stemmed from the perceived threat imposed to Museveni's hold on power in Uganda. While acknowledging Gaddafi's flattering overtures, Museveni withdrew from fully aligning with his agenda, firmly declaring his stance against being subdued by another leader. He adamantly insisted that leadership in his domain will either be his or no one else's. Furthermore, Museveni's rise to power boosted his influence within the region, enabling him to serve the interests of Western powers through military intervention in countries like Somalia. Additionally, he provided intellectual support to CIA operatives, aligning himself with Western agendas. Museveni's prioritization of Western interests, overdose of his African counterpart, became apparent during an African Union meeting in Accra, Ghana in 2007. Fearing repercussions from Western powers, Museveni vehemently imposed the notion African unity, cognitive of the pivotal role these powers played in maintaining his grip on power. Museveni's apprehensions as regard to Gaddafi's growing influence and the potential consequences of betraying him were undoubtedly compounded by his frequent interactions with U.S. officials. During his son's graduation in the United States on June 13, 2008, Museveni confided in Assistant Secretary General of State for African Affairs Jendi Fraser. He was skeptical toward the necessity of a unified Africa, citing linguistic and cultural diversities. Moreover, Museveni allegedly said that Gaddafi resorted to bribery to gather support from smaller African nations, causing dissent in international forums. Concerned about escalating tensions with Gaddafi, Museveni even mentioned fears of a potential attack on his aircraft while traversing international airspace. Seeking reassurance, Museveni turned to the United States for assistance amidst his growing discontent with Gaddafi's influence. Interestingly, while Gaddafi refused to be moved by Museveni's burgeoning ties with America, he remained weary of the Ugandan leader's popularity within his own country. When Muammar Gaddafi made a surprise visit to Uganda in 2008, the government of Yoweri Museveni viewed it as a well-calculated move, aimed at undermining their president. During a 37-minute discourse at an Arab youth event in Uganda, Gaddafi diverted the discussion, making public his intention to collaborate with traditional leaders, rather than elected presidents who advanced his vision for the United States of Africa. 2009, Gaddafi even convinced African traditional leaders to deliberate on continental unity. However, upon learning about the gathering, Museveni intervened, preventing all Ugandan traditional rulers from participating. Museveni's strategy to undermine Gaddafi's influence also included persuading him that cooperating with the Western leaders could yield significant benefits. Allegedly, Museveni asserted Gaddafi that former U.S. President George Bush will lift sanctions on Libya and initiate investments in his country if Gaddafi dismantled his weapons of mass destruction. Subsequent discussions with British diplomats reportedly convinced Gaddafi that Museveni had betrayed him by misrepresenting the situation, leading Gaddafi to build resentments towards the West for its failure to deliver promised benefits. In the end, Gaddafi's failure to possess a formidable nuclear arsenal, capable of deterring external threats particularly from Museveni and by extension the West, proved to be his greatest mistake. This was one more theoretical reason amongst others that led to Gaddafi's downfall. And so in the aftermath of Gaddafi's demise, Museveni sought to fill the void left by the Libyan leader, advocating for African unity in financing security. However, despite his efforts, Museveni always lacked the charisma and financial clout effectively champion such initiatives. Moreover, his past cooperations with Western powers, including his role in Gaddafi's downfall, undermines his credibility within African as well as international spheres. Notably, during a speech in 2021, Museveni criticized Western powers for their narrow-minded agendas, despite his previous coordination with them. Ultimately, Museveni's decision to betray Gaddafi has resulted in his precarious position, as he now finds himself isolated and without allies, if and when his hold on power begins to erode. But according to you, what is the lesson to be learned in this video? Tell us what you think in the comment section. Thank you for watching till this end.